Why is it that bands don't exist in the vast numbers that they used to exist? I know they're still out there. I know they're around. There's definitely people still trying to make it as a band, but the number is so much smaller. Why is that? I have a couple theories, and I'm also interested in what you guys think. So, you know, feel free to chime in. My goal here is to try to help anybody who's trying to figure out how to either navigate getting into a band or whether or not they should. This is all the stuff I can put together. First off, you have to realize the world we live in today is extremely technologically dependent. People are glued to their phones. Back in when I was forming bands, which my first band I was in like 5th grade was the first time I started playing with people. Young, right? So I don't know how old you even are at that age, but I was young when I figured out who in the school also played instruments, wasn't friends really with any of them, and became friends with them so that we could then jam. So in today's world, I hate to say it, but I think people are operating a lot of people, not everybody, of course, but there's so many people who don't even have the social skills that we used to take for granted that most people had at that age of like as young as whatever that is, 11, 12, I don't even know. Young. So what I'm saying is you got to realize you're fighting this social skills thing that keeps getting weaker and weaker and weaker all the time that people completely withdraw and feel totally comfortable living in technology as opposed to living in the real world and interacting with real people. So that's where you get things like, I forget what video it was, but I talked about how it's helpful to have, to talk to other people who are mixers or, like make friends with people who do what you do. And, sometimes somebody asked me, it's like, that's easier said than done. Like, how do I do that? You do it by putting yourself out there. That means the first, like, whenever people think social media is a terrible thing and all this, it's a great way to actually meet people. There's been a few people since I've started my channel who I've met through the channel who I can imagine myself being friends with for a long time, like for the foreseeable future, because they're great people. And they do what I do. We share similar ideas, and a lot of times their background is completely different in completely different music. Sometimes on the other side of the world. I met an awesome dude from Japan through my channel. So the point is, there's no like one way to start getting in deeper into the scene of what you love. You got to start somewhere, and I would say post things and see who interacts with you. Sometimes you're going to be people you won't want to talk to, and then a lot of times you'll find people you do. Also, go out to live shows. Go see bands play. Find where that is. Now, some places, if you're in the boondocks, for example, it's really difficult to find maybe places with people playing shows. I know exactly what that's like because I'm not in the most populated area, and I come from living in a place like Manhattan, extremely populated. Like, so I get how it's difficult, but you'd be surprised, man. Just make it a thing where instead of doing whatever you typically do, which for a lot of us is literally not going out, because a lot of us value our free time and we spend it working on our craft and this and that, but going out to see live shows, see live music, interact with the people there, it's a great way to take a step forward in terms of who you know that's making music, at the very least, musicians. And sometimes you'll find other people who also have the ability to record or have engineered for a few years in some capacity or whatever. You can't have this high bar of who you'll be friends with. You got to sort of be friends with a bunch of people and then see what happens with that and who's worth being friends with and who is. Like, you just got to put yourself out there, bottom line. Also, you know, there's something that's very helpful for people who are trying to like mix their own stuff in a studio. When you do become friends with people who play live shows, you'd be surprised the amount of times those people, depending on where you're playing, there might not be a sound guy at that place. A lot of the places by me are the kind of places the band shows up with their entire backline. They bring their own PA, they bring their own soundboard, they do essentially their own sound. And if you are somebody who knows more than they do, they'll be more than willing to let you sit down at that board and make them sound better. You may have to do this a couple times before they agree to even give you some part of the cut, because in some places, there's not a lot of money to go around in general, so it may be hard to get paid anything, but the experience of doing that is extremely valuable because it's you being under the gun to get stuff done quick. People are listening to that band sound like crap until you twist the knobs to make it not sound like crap. So you gotta literally it's almost like, you're under fire, making it sound as great as you can possibly make it as quick as possible. So you can't second guess yourself. So it's a great way to like hone your skills of getting a balance right first. Most important thing, try to get the balance close so you know what to do next. Then, depending on what kind of mixing board you're dealing with, will determine what else you have to do. I did sound recently for a friend of mine's band, and it was my job just to make them sound as good as I can. And they set pretty much everything up ahead of time, and I just had to come and start dealing with the soundboard. And it was in like this field. So I stood in the middle of this field while they were playing and just started dialing stuff in. And on that particular soundboard, there were gates for every channel, there was compression on every channel, there was obviously EQ on every channel, and I had a bunch of tools at my disposal. So what do you do first? And also, what can you not solve with that board that needs to be solved? So you learn just things that they will always be in your head once you learn them once. For example, just from playing in a band, I learned that if people have those stage wedge monitors, where that monitor is in relation to where that vocal mic is above it, like you got a singer with a monitor in front of them, and usually, like for me, there was a pedal board, monitor, then the mic. If that monitor was too close to the mic, pointing up directly at it, feedback city all day. So you learn simple things like we got to pull this away from the mic. The further away we get it, even a few more inches is better to stopping that feedback. And we could crank the volume up a little more as a result. You also learn things like people place the PA speakers kind of arbitrarily. They're just like, oh, this is the right spot for a left and right main monitor, the mains for everyone to listen to. Well, is that in direct line with where the microphones are? Like, how is this stuff placed? So I looked at it and I was like, we got to pull those monitors forward as much as we can because your vocal mics are practically in front of the monitors, like the mains. So let's get those back. Let's get the mains forward. Let's, put the monitors as far away from the mics and not essentially you want the mic pointing the opposite direction of the monitor. I got a keyboard guy with his monitor blasting at his mic, which is facing the monitor. Of course it's going to feedback. We've got a drummer whose mic is facing this keyboardist monitor. Like, of course it's going to feedback. It's just so funny to me how without doing this for a little bit of time, you just never realize all these things that have nothing to do with the board and everything to do with how good things sound. So, this is also, I think, the reason, if we're going to transition a little bit here, to why it's so hard to get a band to, assemble. To get a band to want to be a band is difficult because first of all, it requires a lot of people to be on board with showing up, having the social skills to communicate and be somewhere on time and plan their schedule accordingly. So they got to care enough. They got to be able to they got to be willing to learn the songs, to come to rehearsals, because being in a band is an ecosystem. So playing within that band in a way that makes the band sound better is a process where everyone is feeding off each other. And that's why if you change one member in a band, it sounds completely different. You really have to have a band that's dedicated enough and willing to put in the time, because it's so disheartening for a band to have a guy rehearse with them for 6 months, play with them for 6 months, and then he disappears. You got to essentially teach somebody else now what everybody else sort of came up together knowing, learning over those 6 months. It's a pain. I get it. It sucks. So as a result, you become very disheartened when that happens, and inevitably it's bound to happen. People's lives change. That stuff happens, right? So but it shouldn't deter you from doing it, because what you learn from being in that band setting, you might never learn until you're around somebody to help you. It's not always where you'll meet somebody on the phone or something and talk to them. Now you got a mixer friend and now you learn the things you need to know. A lot of times it's from being around it. Like in a band setting, for example, a drummer could practice by himself and learn tons about playing drums and get tight, play with a metronome and everything, but he might not know how to play drums in a band context. It's a very different thing. And I've done that multiple times where I've played in bands with drummers who didn't know how to play in a band context. And the only reason I know that they're missing things is because I have seen the comparison and played with drummers who do know how to play in a band context and what they do in order to keep the band together and tight. You must sort of lead from behind the drums. It's a very interesting thing. It's not a great job for people who are extremely passive. It's you sort of have to keep people. You're the timekeeper. So it's very hard to do that if you're somebody who can't assert themselves. So but you also have to be willing to listen, because you don't just come to the party knowing how to be a drummer in a band. Somebody has to teach you that kind of stuff. And there's been plenty of drummers that I've played with who had drum teachers, but they never discussed that stuff, the critical stuff. Like when there's a spot in the song that is a rest for like 2, 3, 4 bars, whatever it is, maybe 1 bar, just 3 beats of a rest. Are you using your hi-hat to keep time? Are you coming in, on the and beat with a snare plop to right before the 1 so that everybody knows where the 1 is? Like, what are you doing to keep this band sounding tight? And a lot of times that stuff needs to be taught, but it needs to be taught to someone who will listen. And herein lies the rest of the problem with trying to be in bands. Again, I'm not dissuading you from doing it. I'm just saying that these are the things almost to watch out for. If you're in a band with people that for whatever reason you feel like you can't talk to about a problem that you're experiencing in the band, like for example, if somebody, isn't that good at something and they need to practice something specific, but you feel like you can't tell them that because of their personality or how they react, whatever it is. And you can't, like, if you're feeling, I wish I could say this, but I can't, that band is doomed. That band is doomed. And now that could be because of you, because like I said, sometimes social skills are such where people can't communicate today. It's very rare that people are able to communicate. I shouldn't say very rare. It's much more rare than it used to be before people were so consumed with technology being their communication. They lost a lot of the ability to do what is necessary in order to keep a band progressing forward and being tighter instead of always the same. No matter how many rehearsals you have, always the same. And so what I'm saying is there are some people who cannot be talked to. So if it's not you who's not willing to talk, because in order to do that, you might have to risk getting kicked out of the band, but it's all about how you say things. What you say is largely how you say it will determine if that person, reacts negatively or not. But some people, as soon as they think you're criticizing what they're doing, they react poorly. And no matter what, if you're dealing with somebody like that, it's not necessarily your fault that you can't communicate with them. That could be them. And that's the opposite of the kind of band you want to be in, because you need to be able to communicate to get out what is wrong and what problems are. Like I said, a band is an ecosystem. If something's destroying the ecosystem and everyone in the band can't talk about it because of whatever reason, that's a recipe for disaster. You have to be able to talk about it. And you talking about it, if you like I said, it takes some balls, some guts to be like, listen, this is what's going on. And, it's nothing against you. I love you as a person. Maybe they're your friend and you don't want to offend them. Like, this is a big problem. You need to be able to talk to the person, especially if they're your friend. Why are you worried about talking to them? So the point is this: people in bands can't be so sensitive, because if they are, they will never improve. They'll never be able to take criticism. They'll never be able to fix a problem and potentially make a slight turn or adjustment to make that act better, to be able to get somewhere. Because the thought that, like, you're good enough as you are, You always gotta be trying to do as much as you possibly can to make it in the music business in any way, shape, or form, no matter how you determine what make it is, even if it's only keep the band together. You have to be willing to do everything to make that band sound as good as possible. That is to be, like, forward progress. As good as the band can sound, you know, what how do we achieve that? If you can't communicate, you will never get there, and if you have a big, like, octopus in the band that's just this giant octopus flailing around that you can't fix what's going on in this whole section, you know, if it's a friend of yours that's that band, then that's why you're doing it. Just understand you only have so much time, okay? So you're dedicating your time to something that is a train wreck that will never be able to be fixed because that person cannot be talked to. That's like I said, if it was me, I would abandon that ship and move to something where you can, you know, put your efforts towards something that might have a chance of growing because everyone in it's open-minded. Everyone in it's willing to at least hear criticism because they're not so sensitive. So today, the biggest problem I think of why people there are so many less bands than there should be is because so many people are too sensitive too. It's the most sensitive it's ever been. My bass player, who I've known since college, the reason I met him is because I walked into the room of somebody playing. Like, you gotta be willing to take that first step. He was playing his bass. I walked into his room, his dorm in college, and I was like, "Yo, what's good?" And I brought my guitar, and I was like, "Let's jam." Somebody has to be willing to take the step, and then now we're still friends. Going to the dude's wedding soon. So what I'm saying is, like, it's been so many years I've been friends with this dude from one act of, like, there's somebody playing on my floor, couple doors down from me, I'm going. Guitar, here we go. Somebody's gotta be willing to take the step. Trust me when I tell you also sometimes it might cost you something. Like, if you could say that you could have a friend who would help you through engineering or producing or mixing or being in a band, if you could have somebody whose opinion you valued, but it would cost you $100, would it be worth it for you to build that relationship if it costs you that? Because sometimes maybe it's not 100, maybe it's gas money, maybe it's the effort to drive somewhere and put yourself out there and say, hey, and, like, get a couple people's numbers from a bar who just played, and the band is great and you want them to come to your studio and record something or whatever. My point is, it's always an investment, whether you're just paying somebody directly to ask a bunch of questions to, or you're going to a bar or a venue to hope to meet some people who you're then gonna record or do something with or whatever. It's always an investment. So start investing in yourself. Put you could take that money and spend it on a number of things that mean nothing. You could buy 2 dinners and all of a sudden you spent way more than what I'm talking about. So, like, all you gotta do is put put your effort, your energy, your money in the right place. And the same thing with when you're in a band. You focus on the band that is going to go somewhere because the people in it can listen to criticism and everyone wants the same thing, which is to take what we're doing and make it palatable and a great experience for everybody watching. And what do we need to do that? And what are the problems? And I know you're my great friend, but I gotta tell you this, and I hope you don't take it the wrong way. And you hope they listen. That literally, but don't waste your time on the people that don't listen, and don't waste your effort in a project that ain't going nowhere because there's a lot of the ecosystem that's just all disaster and it cannot be cleaned up. It's polluted. It's a disaster. That fish tank needs that catfish on the glass eating the algae or everybody in the fish tank dies. And everybody in a band has a different role. And you'd be surprised who you wind up learning things from. Could be all sorts of different things. So the best part about a band is the fact that people can divide up tasks into the people that are best at accomplishing whatever it is because of the resources they have at their disposal. That could be they're a better talker, better negotiator, better at whatever. Somebody is good at something, you put them on that. Sometimes it's just artwork. We need a bunch of, we need flyers, we need posters, we need somebody to do the outreach. Who's good at that? Somebody's good at that. Whereas when you do it all yourself, you're a one-man show. And believe me when I tell you, if there's nobody you can find being a one-man show is better than not doing nothing, but you'll always sort of be isolated and never learn as much as you would learn if you played with people and you tried to get into a band context in some way. Whether it's just being an engineer for a band, or doing live sound, you learn no matter what you do. If you take the steps to do these things, you can't just sit home, do nothing, and expect to now make the friends and learn the stuff. You got to put yourself out there. Trust me, no matter what you play in the band, what I just said probably applies to you. If you've ever been in a band, you know what I'm talking about. So, questions, comments, answers, throw it in there. I'm sure there's other opinions and things that I haven't really considered, but I miss the era of bands, and the knowledge it takes to set up mics and record things. You're going to mess up a bunch of times. Be willing to fail at that and have guys around you be totally upfront. Be like, listen, I'm going to get good at this. Sorry, these first recordings were terrible. Let's keep doing it. Every rehearsal, it'll get a little bit better. And you learn something every time. Don't keep the mic in the same place every time if the recording was terrible. Move it around. You will learn so much just from doing. Way, way, way more from doing than you could ever learn even watching videos. So go do more stuff when it comes to setting up mics, recording bands, playing out. Get out there, watch people, meet people, learn how to talk to people, all right? It's so funny to say that, but it's true, I think physical effort is so much less than it ever was before in terms of people realizing you gotta put effort out if you want to get something back, no matter what you do in life. The harder you work, the more likely it is to happen. It's not just going to happen. Questions, comments, answers, throw it in there. I appreciate it. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.